What's going on, everybody? My name's the Bloodswinger, and ladies and gentlemen, it is time to discuss Marvel's Avengers, the video game. So finally, the reveal from Square Enix. We saw the tease for this game. I don't know why. It feels like it was maybe even 2 years ago. But we saw, of course, the final trailer. We saw different gameplay elements. They discussed different elements. So we're going to run through everything that you need to know for this particular trailer. And as far as just the general details that they've discussed so far. And of course, in addition to that, I do want to hear your opinions and thoughts down in the comment section below, because interestingly enough, a lot of people have seemingly really disliked the trailer, and I'm trying to understand why. I have a suspicion that it's probably because this game doesn't look like it's based on the MCU, and because there's a lot of MCU fans out there, myself included. I think people wanted it to probably be a little bit more similar in design and, you know, what we get to play through based on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I'll explain why I think that makes absolutely zero sense and why I'm actually absolutely happy about the fact that they've gone this way. So first and foremost, let's go on ahead and discuss the trailer itself. So I'm not going to play the trailer just for the sake of copyrights and more importantly because you've probably already seen it yourselves. But essentially, the trailer opens up with a scene of what seems like Avengers Day or A-Day, and what looks like the Avengers setting up their new base on the West Coast, so kind of like the West Coast Avengers. And then as all of this is going on, they are rushed into battle as it seems like there's an attack that has been placed upon San Francisco, and it looks like one of the characters at the helm of this attack is actually Taskmaster, which was pretty cool to see actually a villain in there as well. Now, as this attack is unfolding and the Avengers are trying to stop them, it seems like a big, massive explosion goes off because there was a certain what looks like almost like a nuclear power used to power up the helicarrier. And as this occurs, the kind of stark ending happens to this particular trailer. And then the very wrap up of the trailer, we see a statue that says in memory of Steve Rogers, and we see Tony Stark, who looks very how do we put it? Looks like he hasn't been looking after himself in quite a while, and he's debating and having a bit of a shouting match with Bruce Banner. And as all of this is unfolding, it becomes kind of clear that, based on what they're talking about, that it seems like Captain America dies relatively early on in this game. So that definitely sets the stakes quite high up there. And from there, they kind of wrap up the trailer and they get us set up with a few different other gameplay elements. We see Thor popping off. We see Iron Man in space, which looked really cool. So we obviously see that there will be different costumes for our heroes and for our Avengers as a whole. But what's interesting is that then came the response to just this trailer. And interestingly enough, a lot of people hate the designs of the characters. They think Black Widow looks weird. They think Thor looks odd. They hate the Iron Man suit. To me, I want to see the actual suits and everything in gameplay and such, because for example, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when I saw the Spider-Man PS4 costume, like the advanced suit for the very first time, I was like, I'm not sure I like that. Like, I wasn't too big of a fan. And the reason why I'm bringing up that game is because I have another thing we need to run through here in a second. But when that was revealed, I was not a huge fan of that. I was like, this is not really what I would want to see. And I feel like they should have gone more classic Spider-Man or something that looks more like the MCU if they want to. But they went their own separate way and gave us a very, very unique costume that looked completely different. And keep in mind, you see a lot of those classic costumes and you see costumes from the MCU inside Spider-Man PS4. Meaning that, don't forget, people, there's a good chance that there will be reskins for these characters. They can do a Chris Hemsworth Thor if that's what you want him to look like. They can do a Tony Stark that's based on Robert Downey Jr. Like, all of those things are still possible to be in the game through DLC or just simply different costumes for these heroes. That's why I just was so confused by people's reception to it, to just instantly be like, I absolutely despise it. But then again, I also do feel like a lot of times when there's something popular, it's popular equally to dislike it immediately and disregard it right away. Now, what's interesting is that in this trailer, outside of that little debate, we do hear some things that hint to the fact that this Avengers game takes place in the same universe as Spider-Man PS4. If you don't remember, there is several scenes, I think 2 or 3 times in Spider-Man PS4 when you're swinging through and he mentions the Avengers. I think you have to either run on the Avengers building or something along those lines, on the Stark building. And when he mentions it, he says, oh man, well, those guys are out in the West, which this A-Day and everything happens in the West. It's in the western part of the United States. So it's interesting that it's kind of a coincidence, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And what's interesting equally so is that the creative director of Marvel Games, Bill Roseman, he was asked about whether or not these games take place in the same world, and he basically said, if I respond to this, he would feel that the roof would collapse on him or something like that. So essentially not saying no right off the bat, which to me usually means that there's a good chance that they are. I think that it's one of those things where they'll see how it does, and maybe there will be some hints in this Avengers game to Spider-Man PS4. And if this game does well and it's well received, similarly to how Spider-Man PS4 was, then I think they will cross over these titles. Because the interesting thing is that if we look at the character models, they don't look completely off of the art style that we see in Spider-Man PS4. Like, they're very similar styles. So you could see how one could transition into the other and vice versa, which I think is super duper cool. Now, some of the other announcements and some of the other things from the trailer itself that we saw, first and foremost, most importantly, is of course the release date, which will be May 15th, 2020, which was kind of surprising. I don't know why. We saw so much about this game and we just kept getting more and more details during this conference, whether it be them talking about things like if we're going to have single player or multiplayer, and we'll discuss all that in a second. But as they were unfolding all these things, I was like, okay, there's a good chance that this thing is coming out later on this year. Like, this could be a December or November game just based on how much they're talking about. And unfortunately, it looks like we will have to wait till next year to play it. But luckily, it's not going to be late next year. It will be available in the early half, which I think is fantastic. So I'm very, 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 very happy about that. Now, with that in mind, the other aspects or the other elements that were revealed, single player and multiplayer co-op will be both in this game. And what's interesting is that not only will they be in the game, but there will be DLC that will be added into the game that will be absolutely free, which was so crazy to hear. Like, I don't know how or why they're doing it, but hey, listen, I'm not going to complain. I'm on the consumer side, so I'll be happy to not have to pay for more characters and more variety to our story. But every new superhero and every new region will be delivered at no additional cost, which was very interesting because I felt like a lot of people heard the first part but not the second part. Because that's intriguing in terms of like how much more expansive will this world be in terms of just scale and how much further we'll be able to go. Are they going to introduce different locations that are iconic from the Marvel universe? Or is this just going to be different missions or little pieces of challenges and timed events or whatever it might be, or co-op tasks that you have to tackle? So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how far they're gonna go with the DLC, considering that it's free, because it's like, how can you sustain doing it completely for free? So I don't know, but regardless, I'm curious, super duper curious to see what their business model will be and what will be the quality of the DLC if it's free. You know, unless like there is a part of me that to an extent wants to be more cynical and think, okay, well, maybe the reason why they're doing free DLC is because when the game comes out, it seems like the playable characters are going to be Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, and Thor. And because of that, since we're only getting 5 characters, maybe there's really not a lot of content to the game. Maybe the game lacks in the content department. So because of that, it's almost like to supplement the rest of the game, they will do so through DLC. And what's interesting is that we do get kind of a teaser of our potential maybe first DLC character, or maybe he'll be available throughout, but it was an appearance by Hank Pym. And I will say Hank Pym is the one character model where I was like, oh, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know. He just looked very different to anything we've seen before. At least, like, you know, Iron Man and Thor, they were kind of different renditions. It's like there's been thousands of artists that have interpreted these characters in thousands of different ways, and I'm obviously exaggerating, but basically, there's been a lot of iterations of Thor. There's been a lot of iterations of Tony or Iron Man, and these did not look that far off. Whereas with Hank Pym, I was really confused as to where they went with his design. But regardless, what I'm happy about is that it seems like they're leaning into like an unexpected character as our first reveal here. You know, you would think like, okay, maybe one of the obvious ones that they would have shown here at the end of the trailer would have been Hawkeye, since of course he was part of the original Avengers in the movie. So, you know, for them to kind of co-market with the movie, it would make sense to show Hawkeye here. Plus, Hawkeye started the West Coast Avengers, so since they are in the West Coast, you would think it would make sense to have Hawkeye appear here as well, but he didn't. So I'm very, very intrigued by their choice of character, and I'm very intrigued to see how will all this play out going into the future as they release more and more characters, and how many will they stop at, and so on and so forth. So those will all be things that we will get to find out down the line. Now, I did want to go on ahead and also mention that they said there will be no pay to win, which means that there's nothing to buy that will influence your gameplay, which again was kind of an interesting note here. And then the other thing was the no loot boxes. So when I heard those two things, a little light went off, and I feel like I know their monetization strategy, which is going to be skins. So it's kind of like Fortnite, where essentially you're going to buy the game, and then all the DLC for the game is always going to be free. So like your default skin for Hank Pym will be free. But if you want your Hank Pym to look like he does in the MCU movies, well, you have to pay for that. If you want Hank Pym to look like he does in the comic books right now, you're going to have to pay for that. If you want Iron Man to have a multitude of different costumes, you're going to have to pay for that. That's how they get around the whole thing of it's not a loot box, it's a specific item that you buy, and it's not pay to win because these are all cosmetic items and they don't affect the gameplay. So that's my prediction there. I could be wrong. I know people are going to say, I hope you're wrong, because they want to see a multitude of costumes and everything like that. But I feel like that might be their way to monetize the DLC, is to say that, hey, maybe you get maybe 1 or 2 costumes for free, but then outside of that, all the other special costumes that they will be releasing for these characters will probably be paid. That's my prediction, and we'll see what happens. Now, some of the other details we could discuss here. The team that's working on this is Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal. So again, Crystal Dynamics, obviously, probably most, I would say most famous off, at least recently, let's put it that way, most recently famous for the fact that they put together the Tomb Raider games, like the new Tomb Raider stuff. So that's one of their big titles that they've worked on. And then Eidos Montreal did Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, and then I think they also did assist on the Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider relaunch games as well. So those are kind of your big two modern day, I guess, developers from Square Enix. So I think that, again, it's not that we don't have talented people behind this. So because of that, I feel like it should be a great game. Because if you look at the Tomb Raider games, even if you didn't love the Shadow of the Tomb Raider game, the most latest one that came out last year, I think that you can respect that game from a technological standpoint and what it did from gameplay perspectives and such, meaning that they've never done crappy games. So I'm not worried that this is going to be feel like a cash in or not really deliver up to the standards that we saw with Spider-Man PS4. And hopefully it lives up to at least those standards. If it surpasses it, then that's going to blow us all away. If it's better than Spider-Man PS4, that would be absolutely exceptional. So with that in mind, now that we've wrapped that up, let's discuss one other detail here, and that is where will you be able to play this game? And this is where there's, again, some controversy with this title at this point in time, and that is the fact that the game has been confirmed to come out on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the PC. But interestingly enough, we didn't see Google Stadia there, which, again, I don't know why some people were saying, oh, why not Google Stadia? It's like, you haven't even had that product in your hands. I don't know how people assume that they will want to use Google Stadia before they've even had their hands on a Google Stadia or used it regularly. But regardless, the one that did get people upset was the Nintendo Switch. So when they basically did not announce that this is coming to the Switch. I saw a few friends, including some close friends who have a Switch, told me like, what the heck, dude, this was something I was looking forward to. Why would it not come out on there? I feel like it's probably some sort of a hardware issue, meaning that the Switch just simply can't run this game at its maximum capabilities the same way that the PS4 and Xbox One and most importantly PC can run it. So that's my guess. I do feel like there's a good chance that this game might come out to the Switch, but just like other games right now, like for example, we just saw The Witcher 3 announced to come out, the definitive edition to come out on the Switch, and it's coming to the Switch, whereas it was on the other home consoles and PC for years now. So I think that there might be a similar kind of lower resolution, you know, kind of more simplified variation of this game that will be available on the Switch, just simply not day and date at the same time to launch as it will be on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. So maybe like at the end of the year in 2020, or maybe at the beginning of 2021, they would announce like, hey, and the Switch is getting Marvel's Avengers. Of course, a lot of this is really going to depend on how well received this game is going to be, how well supported it's going to be. But the sounds of it, it sounds like they do have kind of a long-term plan. In fact, when they were talking about it, they did say that this is a years-long plan. So it seems like they're going to support this title in a similar way like Ubisoft does with something like Rainbow Six Siege, where they add new operators and new characters and new operations and new maps, and there's new weapons, and there's just this constant swarm of content that is given to the community, and then they support it in addition to that through esports and so on and so forth. But obviously, this is not going to have an esports component, so this will be supported more so from just a content perspective, and that sounds super exciting. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think. I'm genuinely curious what the Blitzwinger community here on YouTube thinks about the Marvel's Avengers video game, because I was honestly taken aback by how many people absolutely despised this reveal, how few people were excited about the reveal. So I'm very, very excited to find out about that, what you guys think. And the other thing is that they did mention that PlayStation will be getting exclusive rewards. So they kind of teamed up with them the same way that PlayStation has teamed up with Destiny in the past, or PlayStation teamed up with, what is the other game I'm forgetting? Call of Duty in the past. So they'll have some exclusive content, including the beta being available first on PlayStation 4. Thanks all for watching, guys. I'll see you all later. Alligators. That sounds like a paid sponsorship by PlayStation. It is not, but I'm curious to hear your opinions down in the comment section below. Are you excited? Are you less or more excited after what we have seen at E3? Bye-bye, guys.